What would it actually feel like to be the first woman? Not the woman who ate the fruit, not the name history remembers. Before any of that, can you even imagine what that would feel like? To wake up, and your very first thought isn't about yourself. You had no idea how extraordinary that was, because when you've never known a broken world, wholeness doesn't feel miraculous. It just feels normal. But that raises another question. If you lived in a world untouched by pain, what would paradise actually feel like? Not look like, feel like. Imagine opening your eyes, and the first thing that greets you is light. Not harsh, not blinding, golden. Soft enough to rest upon your skin like a gentle embrace, warming you without ever asking you to seek shade. You draw in a slow breath. The air is impossibly clean. Every inhale carries the fragrance of flowering vines, rich earth, fresh rain, wild blossoms, and fruit ripened beneath the morning sun. Nothing is stale. Nothing is polluted. Nothing carries the scent of decay. The world smells as though it has only just been spoken into existence. You begin to walk. Beneath your feet, the earth is soft and welcoming, springing gently with every step as if creation itself delights in carrying you. Grass brushes against your ankles like silk. Wildflowers bloom without restraint, spilling rivers of crimson, sapphire, gold, and violet across the landscape, each one opening effortlessly toward the light. Towering trees stretch toward the heavens with branches heavy beneath an endless harvest. Not one leaf curls with age. Not one branch bows from weakness. Every tree is flourishing, every vine overflowing, every seed becoming exactly what it was created to become. Nearby, a river winds through the garden. Its waters are so clear they seem almost invisible, flowing over polished stones that shimmer beneath the surface like scattered jewels. You kneel beside it. The water slips effortlessly between your fingers, cool, pure, alive. There is no mud clouding its depths, no stillness that speaks of stagnation. It sings, a quiet melody as it journeys through the heart of Eden, nourishing everything it touches. In the distance, great lakes mirror the sky so perfectly that the horizon almost disappears. Beyond them, the sea stretches endlessly beneath the morning light, its surface rising and falling with slow, rhythmic breaths, reflecting heaven itself. Nothing crashes in violence. Nothing threatens. The waters move with quiet strength, as though every wave already knows the one who told it where to stop. Everywhere you look, life is thriving. Birds glide effortlessly through the open sky, their songs weaving together like a choir that is never rehearsed because harmony comes naturally. Butterflies drift through shafts of sunlight like living petals carried on the breeze. Bees move from blossom to blossom without hurry, every flower offering freely, every creature receiving without taking too much. A family of deer lifts their heads as you pass. They don't run. They simply watch you with gentle curiosity before returning to graze. A fox wanders through tall grass. A wolf rests beneath the shade of an ancient tree. A lion stretches in the warmth of the morning sun. There is strength, but there is no violence. Power, without fear. Every creature lives exactly as it was created to live. Not surviving, flourishing. Even the wind feels alive. It dances through the leaves with a sound so gentle it almost feels like music, carrying the fragrance of blossoms across the garden, cooling your skin before disappearing again into the trees. And then, you notice your own body. It is as much a part of this harmony as the rivers, the birds, and the forests. Your breathing is unhurried. Your heartbeat is steady. Your shoulders are weightless. There is no tension hidden beneath your muscles. No instinct quietly whispering, "Be careful." No voice asking, "What if something goes wrong?" Your body has never learned to protect itself, because nothing has ever tried to harm it. You are not surviving. You are simply alive. Perhaps that's what paradise truly was. Not just breathtaking beauty, not endless abundance, but perfect harmony. A world where every river reached the sea. Every tree bore fresh fruit. Every bird found its song. Every creature knew its place. And every human heart rested completely in the goodness of the one who made it. And perhaps the most extraordinary part, you never stop to admire paradise. Because when every day is filled with perfect beauty, beauty no longer surprises you. It simply becomes the rhythm of your life. You had never questioned whether you belonged here, because everything around you quietly whispered the same truth. You are home. But that raises another question. What happens when you've lived your entire life in a world where nothing has ever hurt you? What does love actually feel like before you've ever been betrayed? Before you've ever been misunderstood? Before you've ever questioned whether someone might leave? Because before you ever met the serpent, before you ever reached for the fruit, there was Adam. Imagine meeting the only other human being in existence. Not wondering, do they like me? Not wondering, what should I say? Not wondering if you're saying too much or not enough. There are no awkward silences, no mixed signals, no pretending to be someone you're not, because there is no one else to impress, no past relationships to compare, no fear of rejection, no heartbreak waiting somewhere in the future, just two human beings, seeing one another exactly as they were created to be. Genesis tells us you were both naked, and you felt no shame. We often hear that verse and think only about the absence of clothing, but perhaps it tells us something even deeper. There was nothing to hide, not your bodies, not your thoughts, not your hearts. Imagine looking into someone's eyes and never wondering what they're thinking about you. Imagine laughing without wondering if you sound foolish. Imagine making a mistake without fearing it will change how you're loved. Imagine being completely known and discovering that being known only makes you feel safer. Every conversation was free. Every smile was genuine. Every silence was comfortable. Trust wasn't something you built. It was the atmosphere you breathed. Love wasn't something you protected. It was something you simply lived inside. You never wondered if Adam would wake up one morning and love you less. That thought had never entered a human mind. You never compared yourself to another woman. There wasn't another woman. You never questioned whether you were enough. Enough compared to what? Enough for whom? Your value had never been measured against anyone else. It simply was. Perhaps that's why Scripture says the two became one flesh. Not merely because you shared life together, but because nothing stood between you. No walls, no masks, no fear, no secrets, no versions of yourselves carefully edited for acceptance. Just complete openness, complete trust, complete peace, and maybe that is the deepest kind of love humanity has ever known. Not because it was perfect people, but because it was love before fear ever taught the heart to protect itself. But if you've spent your entire life believing every voice around you can be trusted, if every relationship you've ever known has only ever been safe, then another question quietly begins to emerge. What would happen the very first time a different voice entered the garden? But that raises another question. How do you recognize danger if you've never experienced it? Think about that for a moment. How do you fear what you've never seen? How do you prepare for what your mind has no name for? From the moment we're born, our brains begin collecting warnings. Don't touch the fire. Be careful near the edge. Don't trust every stranger. Lock the door. Look both ways. Run. Hide. Be careful. By the time we're adults, we've spent our entire lives learning what to fear. You hadn't learned a single one. Not because you were naive, because there was nothing to learn. No one had ever lied to you. No one had ever betrayed you. No one had ever manipulated you. No one had ever hidden selfish intentions behind kind words. Deception wasn't simply unfamiliar. It didn't exist. Imagine trying to explain the color blue to someone born without sight, or music to someone who has never heard sound. Now imagine trying to explain evil to someone who has only ever known goodness. How could they possibly understand it? Every experience you had ever lived pointed toward one conclusion. Creation is good. Life is good. God is good. Every sunrise confirmed it. Every river echoed it. Every conversation with Adam reinforced it. Every creature you encountered reflected it. The world had never given you a reason to question any of it, which means something extraordinary was also true. Curiosity had never been dangerous. Think about that. Today, we're taught to be careful, question motives, watch for manipulation, trust your instincts. But in Eden, curiosity was beautiful. Exploration led to discovery. Questions led to understanding. Wonder led to worship. Every new experience only revealed more of God's goodness. There had never been a moment where curiosity led to regret. So if something new appeared, why wouldn't you move toward it? Why wouldn't you want to understand it? Why would you suspect danger when danger had never introduced itself to the world? And perhaps that's the question we've never really asked. The serpent didn't enter a fearful world. It entered a trusting one. A world where every voice had always spoken truth. A world where every encounter had always been safe. A world where suspicion had never once protected anyone, because there had never been anything to suspect. And if that's the only world you've ever known, what would you do? The first time, something different looked back at you? But that raises another question. What would you notice first if one ordinary day, something in paradise, was different? Not frightening, just different. Imagine another morning. The sun rises exactly as it always has. Golden light spills through the trees. The rivers continue their quiet song. Birds fill the sky with melodies that seem to rise effortlessly from creation itself. The breeze carries the fragrance of blossoms through the garden. Everything is exactly as it has always been. Until something catches your eye, not far away. A creature. You've seen countless creatures before, some with wings, some with fur, some that leap, some that swim. Every one of them has always felt like another expression of the Creator's imagination. So you don't stop because you're afraid. Fear still doesn't exist. You stop because you're curious. This one feels different, not dangerous. Just different. Perhaps it's the way it watches you. Not the casual curiosity of a deer lifting its head from the grass. Not the quiet confidence of a lion resting beneath the shade. Its attention lingers, as though it isn't simply aware of your presence, but interested in you. You pause. The garden is still alive around you. Water still dances over smooth stones. Birds still sing. Leaves still sway in the morning breeze. Nothing else has changed. And yet, this moment somehow feels separated from all the others. You take another step. The creature doesn't run. None of the animals ever do. But neither does it return to what it was doing. It simply continues watching. You wonder, have I seen you before? Perhaps you have. Perhaps you've walked past this creature 100 times. But today, something feels different. Not outside. Inside. Not fear. There is still no fear. Only curiosity. The kind of curiosity every new flower, every distant waterfall, every undiscovered corner of Eden had always awakened. Curiosity had only ever led to beauty. Only ever led to wonder. So why would this moment be any different? You move a little closer. The creature slowly lifts its head. Its eyes meet yours. And for a brief moment, it feels almost as though it is waiting for you. There is no warning, no dark clouds gathering overhead, no sudden silence from the birds. Paradise has not changed. The rivers still flow. The trees still flourish. The wind still carries the scent of life. Everything around you continues singing the same song it always has. You take another step. The creature doesn't move away. It simply watches. Its eyes follow you with a quiet curiosity that feels strangely familiar. You've never had a reason to fear the creatures God made. Every one of them has only ever reflected His goodness. So why would this one be any different? You smile. Perhaps you kneel to get a little closer. The breeze continues to move through the trees. The river keeps singing over smooth stones. Somewhere overhead, birds fill the morning sky with music. Everything about the garden still whispers. You are safe. The creature lifts its head. It looks directly into your eyes. For a brief moment, the two of you simply exist there, surrounded by paradise. Then, it opens its mouth. You expect another sound from creation, perhaps another call, another cry, another song. Instead, you hear words, human words, calm, clear, directed at you. In that instant, something impossible enters the garden. The creature speaks. The conversation that follows would become one of the most important conversations in human history. But something is worth noticing. Scripture doesn't tell us how long you stood there before those first recorded words. Maybe only a few seconds. Maybe much longer. Perhaps there was nothing more than a curious glance, or a quiet moment where two living creatures simply observed one another. We are never told. Instead, Genesis begins with the words that changed everything. Has God indeed said, "You shall not eat from every tree of the garden"? The question hangs in the air, not because you don't know the answer. God's words had never been confusing. They had always been clear. We may eat from the trees of the garden, you answer. But God did say, you must not eat from the tree in the middle of the garden. And then, another sentence follows. You will be like God. Think about what those words actually mean. Until this moment, you had never questioned yourself. You had never wondered if you were missing something. Never believed you needed to become more than the person God had already created you to be. Nothing around you has changed. The garden is still beautiful. The rivers still flow. The trees still flourish. God has not changed. The tree has not changed. But the way you see yourself just did. And perhaps that's where everything truly begins. Not with the fruit, but with a single thought that who God created you to be might somehow not be enough. And for perhaps the first time, the boundary becomes something you're looking at, instead of simply living with. Until this moment, it had been as ordinary as the rivers, as ordinary as the sunrise, as ordinary as breathing. It wasn't something you questioned. It wasn't something you analyzed. It simply belonged, like every other part of the garden. But now, someone has invited you to stop and really look at it, to turn it over in your mind, to examine something you had only ever trusted. The boundary hasn't changed. God hasn't changed. The tree hasn't changed. Only your attention has. And perhaps that's how so many life-changing moments begin. Not because the world suddenly becomes different, but because the way you see yourself in it does. But something else has happened. Something far quieter and far more dangerous. For the first time, you compare yourself to God. Not because you wanted to, because someone suggested you should. You could be like God. Think about what those words do to a mind that has never questioned itself. Until this moment, You had never measured your life against anyone else's. And who wouldn't? You had walked with God. You had seen His goodness in every sunrise, His wisdom woven into every living thing, His generosity in every tree that bore fruit, His love in every moment you had ever lived. Everything beautiful pointed back to Him. So when the serpent says, you could be like God, he isn't tempting you with something ugly. He's tempting you with the one you've admired your entire life. And perhaps that's exactly what made him so clever. He didn't convince you to desire something evil. He convinced you to desire something good outside of the way God had given it. That's a very different temptation. Most of us imagine that if deception came, it would look obviously evil. But the serpent understood something far more dangerous. The most convincing lies are often built around something true. You had never looked at yourself and wondered if you were missing something. Because how could you? You had never known what comparison felt like. And comparison has a strange way of changing everything. The moment you compare yourself to perfection, contentment quietly begins to disappear. Not because you've changed, not because God has changed, but because you're no longer seeing yourself through God's eyes. You're seeing yourself through the lens of what you think you're missing. Maybe that's why the serpent never begins with the fruit. He begins with comparison. Perhaps the serpent never needed you to stop loving God. He only needed you to stop believing that who God created you to be was already enough. Because once you begin chasing the person you think you should become, it's easy to stop trusting the person God already made. Because once you believe that who God created you to be isn't enough, the fruit almost becomes inevitable. The fruit is still in your hand. Nothing about it looks different. It never did. You take one last look, one last breath. Then you reach. Your fingers close around it. You lift it to your lips, and for the very first time, you do something you've never done before. You choose who the serpent says you could become over who God says you already are. You take a bite. Nothing happens. No thunder, no earthquake, no voice from heaven. The garden is still beautiful. The rivers still flow. The birds still sing. For one quiet moment, it almost feels as though nothing has changed. You look around. The world is still here. You're still breathing. The serpent said, you would become like God. God said, you would surely die. But neither seems to have happened. You don't know what to believe. For the first time, certainty gives way to confusion. Was the serpent right? Was God right? Did anything actually happen? Or has nothing changed at all? You look back at the fruit, then toward Adam. Not because you know what will happen, because you don't. Maybe you're hoping he'll experience something different. Maybe you're hoping he won't. Because if nothing changes for him, perhaps nothing has changed for you. He reaches for the fruit. You look toward Adam. It's the same face, the same eyes, the same person. Nothing about him has changed. But for the first time, you don't know what he's thinking. Moments ago, there was nothing to hide. Now, you wonder what he sees when he looks at you. And perhaps that's another thing the serpent stole. Not just your trust in yourself, but your certainty. Then you look at yourself, and for the first time, you see what you've never seen before. Not because your body has changed, not because God has changed, because you have. The same eyes are looking through a different heart. And then, somewhere in the distance, you hear footsteps. The same footsteps that once filled you with peace. The same voice that had always meant you were safe. But this time, everything inside you tells you to run. What would it feel like to hear God's footsteps and suddenly want to hide? You freeze. For a moment, you can't move. The footsteps grow closer, slow, steady, familiar. You've heard them every day of your life. They've never frightened you before. They've always meant peace, safety, home. But today, your heart does something it has never done before. It races. Your breathing becomes shallow. Every instinct inside you whispers the same thing. Hide. Not because God has changed, because you have. You don't stop to think. You don't stop to reason. You simply run. For the very first time, the one you've always run toward is the one you're running from. You reach the trees, the same trees, that once made you feel at home, now become places to disappear. You gather leaves. Your hands move almost instinctively. Not because leaves can undo what happened, but because somehow, being seen no longer feels safe. Then, the footsteps stop, and you hear his voice. Where are you? You know. He already knows. He knows every river, every tree, every corner of the garden. He's not asking because he lost you. He's asking because you've become lost. Adam answers first. I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid. Afraid. No human being has ever spoken that word before. Fear has entered the human story. And perhaps that's what makes this moment so heartbreaking. The God who came to walk with you is still doing what he has always done. His voice hasn't changed. His love hasn't changed. Only the heart, hearing his footsteps, has. The garden falls quiet. For the first time, standing before God feels different. Not because he has changed, because you have. Then, he asks a question. Who told you that you were naked? The words seem simple, but perhaps they are asking something much deeper. Until this moment, there had only ever been one voice telling you who you were. God's, the one who formed you, the one who called his creation. For the first time, your consciousness is divided, not because God has changed, not because creation has changed, but because the way you experience both has. And perhaps that's the deepest consequence of the fall. Not simply that humanity left the garden, but that humanity could no longer experience reality through an undivided consciousness, a fractured consciousness of identity, a divided state of being. For the first time, there were two ways of seeing yourself. One through the identity God had always given you. The other through the identity the serpent had persuaded you to question. And perhaps humanity has been living between those two voices ever since. Maybe that's why this story still feels so familiar. Because the serpent's words never really disappeared. He didn't begin with the fruit. He began with an identity. You could be more. You could become something greater. You could finally be enough. And maybe that was also the longest-lasting lie. Not simply that God was withholding something good, but that the people he had created in his own image were somehow incomplete. Think about that. Adam and Eve had never questioned who they were. They had never compared themselves to anyone. Never wondered if they measured up. Never chased a better version of themselves. Until one conversation planted a single thought. What if who I am isn't enough? And then history continued. Empires rose. Civilizations fell. Thousands of years passed. But somehow the question never left. You're not successful enough. Not attractive enough. Not wealthy enough. Not intelligent enough. Not spiritual enough. Just one more achievement, one more purchase, one more promotion, one more relationship, one more version of yourself, and then you'll finally be enough. But the promise never ends, because the lie was never about the fruit. It was about convincing humanity that the image of God wasn't enough. Maybe that's why the gospel begins where Eden broke, not by telling us to become someone else, but by reminding us whose image we were created to bear. The first temptation whispered, "You are not enough." The story of Scripture answers, "You were always loved before you ever tried to become more." So perhaps the question was never, why did Eve eat the fruit? Maybe the deeper question is, who told you that who God created wasn't enough? But what do you think? What's your answer to this question? The Bible is full of mysteries, and not all of them have simple answers. So what's a Bible question you've always wondered about? Leave it in the comments. It might become our next video.